We are in the midst of another presidential election. Can you believe it? It seems like yesterday we were all being told to put our stuff in boxes because we were going home for 2 weeks and we would be back as soon as this little virus was over. Well, as we all know, that little virus turned out to be the coronavirus, COVID-19. Ended up killing over 1 million people. And if you're listening to this, you survived. We had a lot that went on in the last 4 years, so much so that it seems like a blur for most of us. A lot of us watched our friends die, family die. Some of us ourselves got sick. I have several friends that I know of that were on the brink of death that are still here today, thank God. We watched the presidential election that was from home. We were able to watch a group of people try to overthrow the government, all because somebody who thought they should have won didn't and wanted to overturn the election. But the interesting thing about the election season is the people that come out of the woodwork, the surrogates as they call them. You know, this year we see Laura Loomer. We also see Pete Buttigieg coming out, talking and trying to stir up people for the candidates. But back when Barack Obama was running, there was one man who named himself after his profession. It was Joe the Plumber. And we'll be talking about him on this episode of Learn Something New Today. Joseph Wurzelbacher was born on December 3rd, 1973 in Toledo, Ohio. His parents, Kay and Frank, didn't stay in Toledo for very long. I wouldn't either, to be honest, if you've ever been there. But they moved to Florida when he was really young, and then later, in the middle of high school to be exact, he moved back to Toledo. Now, after high school, Joe enlisted in the Air Force, and he chose plumbing as his career specialty. To be specific, it was Air Force Specialty Code 3E451, or Utility Systems Specialist. On a side note, my dad had a very similar job in the military. He was a mechanic. He repaired cars and trucks and even tanks. So this is a really cool thing to do. Having hands-on skills like that gives you skills when you come out, and in the words of my mom, plumbers, electricians, mechanics are never broke because somebody's always needing some shit done. In the plumbing sense, that's literally. Joe was stationed in Alaska and North Dakota when he was in the military, in the Air Force, and he continued to be of service using his skills where needed. When Joe left the military in 1996, he became a plumbing assistant. Now, despite his career in plumbing, he actually switched careers and was working for a telecommunications service. And according to resources, he was very successful in that. So much so that he eventually wanted to buy a plumbing company, or so he said. Now, around this time, a certain someone was running for president. You've probably heard of him. He's a little guy named Barack Obama. And he was set and eventually became the first African-American president in U.S. history. And eventually, he's somebody that has changed history as well. It was around this time where Barack was visiting Toledo, Ohio, and the small working community. And Joe the Plumber, or Joe Wurzelbacher, decided to ask him a question.
Hey, name's Joe Wurzelbacher. Good to see you, Joe. I'm getting ready to buy a company. Yeah. Makes about $250,000, $270,000, $80,000 a year. All right. Your new tax plan is going to tax me more, isn't it? Well, here's what's going to happen. All right.
This question seemingly came out of left field, and any other politician would have ignored it or gave him a cookie cutter answer, but Barack Obama did a lot different.
Yes. First of all, you get a 50% tax credit, so you get a cut of taxes for your health care. So you would actually get a tax cut on that front. If your revenue is above $250, then from
With 250 down, your taxes are going to stay the same. It is true that for, say, 250 up, from 250 to 300 or so.
Well, here's my question.
I just want to answer your question. So for that additional amount, you go from 36 to 39%, which is what it was under Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
So the reason we're doing that is because 95% of small businesses make less than 250. And so what I want to do is give them a tax cut. I want to give all these folks who are bus drivers, teachers, auto workers who make less, I want to give them a tax cut. And so what we're doing is we are saying that for folks who make more than 250, that marginal amount above 250, they're going to be taxed at a 39 instead of a 36% rate.
Well, the reason why
Obama responded with an explanation of how the tax plan would work, something that most politicians would not be able to do. And most politicians don't do that when they're hit with hard, complex questions. And this might be the reason why we don't see a lot of politicians talking to the public in one-on-one styles like Obama did. But Joe Wurzelbacher, the man who was a plumber and a communications specialist, became an overnight celebrity, garnering the name Joe the Plumber by conservatives. And this celebrity came with a lot of speaking engagements and opportunities. Within 24 hours after his hard-hitting question towards America's first potential African-American president, Joe's house was surrounded by journalists, and he even was able to hold press conferences there.
Plumbing business he works for, and that Obama's tax proposal would cost him more money. If cameras hadn't been there, the exchange might never have gained notoriety.
my son's getting a huge kick out of this, and so it's really cool for him. Like I said earlier, if I can be used as a focal point, great, but ultimately there's major issues out there, and I'm just a flash in the pan. So
Joe the Plumber even became the focal point and the topic of conversation at a national presidential debate.
Years ago, Senator Obama was out in Ohio, and he had an encounter with a guy who's a plumber. His name is Joe Wurzelberger. Joe, what you want to do to Joe the plumber, and millions more like him, is have their taxes increased and not be able to realize the American dream of owning their own business. That's what Joe believes.
He's been watching some ads of Senator McCain's. Let me tell you what I'm actually going to do. What I've
Joe the Plumber was on every single daytime, morning, and evening news show from ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox News, everywhere. And some of them kept asking him a consistent question. Do you make over $250,000? To which he quoted the news agencies a variety of answers that summed up to no. On one, he said, not even close. On another, he said, well, not right now, but I do want to make that in the future. That would be like me getting upset at what's happening to a billionaire or a millionaire or someone making over $250,000. When in all actuality, I don't make that. And my excuse being, well, I want to one day. Personally, I understand the concern, but it wouldn't be the top of priorities when interviewing or trying to talk to a president. My future is in my hands, not necessarily in a president's. On October 16th, 2008, ABC News did a report on a lien against Joe the Plumber for non-payment of taxes. Now, as a man who wanted to make so much money, you would think that it would be so much money. But for a lot of people, it's something that could be taken care of with a payment plan. The lien was for $1,182. And then people got curious. If this man can't pay $1,100 in back taxes, how much money is he really making? Now, the whole time, politicians kept referencing him. Joe the Plumber would come up in every conversation regarding the presidency, especially when it came to the idea of Obama raising people's taxes. But the truth came out that Joe the Plumber was only making about, wait for it, $40,000 a year. It also came out that he had some questionable plumbing credentials as well. He was not a member of the National United Association of Plumbers and Pipe Fitters, and he had never served as an apprentice. And an article in the Toledo Blade came out basically saying this, and I quote, Mr. Wurzelbacher said he worked under Al Newell's license, but according to Ohio building regulations, he must maintain his own license to do plumbing work. He is also not registered to operate as a plumber in Ohio, which means he's not a plumber. So Joe the Plumber was just Joe the Yapper, a guy who got in front of the future first African-American president in the United States and wanted to have a conversation based on hypotheticals. The people that did the investigation on Joe the Plumber eventually resigned simply because they weren't supposed to be using state computers to look up stuff on him improperly. And he did sue, but it looks like the case was eventually dismissed because using a computer database did not violate someone's constitutional rights. But in 2008, shortly after his conversation with Obama, Joe signed with a publicity management agent, and he was actually in the process of a major label record deal and corporate sponsorships. He was in television, commercials, and he even wrote a book. On a side note, Joe was actually the person that helped promote the analog to digital switch. For example, if you don't have cable and you're using a television, you don't have antennas behind it anymore. It's switched to 100% digital. And Joe was actually the person that helped promote that through commercials. He also started promoting his book, Joe the Plumber, Fighting for the American Dream. And in 2009, he became a war correspondent for a media company. His first assignment was visiting Israel for 10 days during the Gaza war. And later on that year, he quit the Republican Party entirely. And from that point on, he would attend events sporadically in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, pretty much all throughout the Rust Belt, promoting different candidates. Even though he was not part of the Republican Party, he stood with a lot of the talking points and the policies and the ideologies of Republicans. In 2014, the calls stopped coming, the money started drying up, and he had to take a job at a Jeep plant. Now, this required him to join a union, something that he had never been a part of before. And he said that his coworkers were bullying him, basically calling him a teabagger, a phrase that was used by people who opposed the bailout of the auto industry, something that Obama did. One person is even quoted as saying, the irony is that Joe the Plumber may not have gotten this auto job if it weren't for the hated bailout of the auto industry. Joe the Plumber was also known for his inflammatory comments, specifically about Mexicans. He's quoted as saying, "For years I've said, put a damn fence on the border, go to Mexico and start shooting." And it didn't just stop there. In 2012, his election campaign released a video in which he said the implementation of gun control resulted in Europe's Jews being unable to defend themselves during the Holocaust. His quote was, "In 1939, Germany established gun control. From 1939 to 1945, 6 million Jews, 7 million others unable to defend themselves were exterminated." In his comment about Mexicans, he said he did not care about being quote-unquote politically incorrect. And in his comments about Jews and the Holocaust and gun control, he stated, quote, "Different countries around the world have tried to disarm their citizens and then have tried to exterminate their own now unarmed citizens. If people are looking to be offended by this video, they are probably serving a political agenda. Unfortunately, there are a lot of whiners out there." Basically doubling down on what he said both times. Joe the Plumber was eventually diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and in 2022, he died at his home in Campbellsport, Wisconsin. He was 49 years old. That's it. That's the show. My name is Anthony Modesto Milian, and this is Learn Something New Today, a history podcast where we talk about historical events and deep dives into historical topics. If you want to support the show, go to the merch store, lsntoday.com, or go to my Patreon, Def Not Ant. They're both in the show notes. No worry. No need to scramble and try to jot things down. If you want to be a sponsor, that would be cool too. My email address will also be in the show notes. DM me. Let's talk. On a side note, y'all really loved that Yusuf Hawkins video. That video has like my phone jumping. But anyway, my name is Anthony Modesto Milian. I'm your host, and I hope you learned something new today.